A struggling widow stumbles upon a luxurious carpet in a landfill, but what she finds hidden inside changes her life forever. Before start, let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. The sun was setting over the small town of Ridgewood, casting a golden glow over the modest homes and forgotten corners where Lauren Caldwell often found herself. Today her destination was the sprawling landfill on the edge of town. It wasn't glamorous, but Lauren had long since given up on appearances. What mattered now was survival, for her and her two children, Dylan and Emma. Lauren parked her aging sedan, the engine sputtering before it finally gave out. She sighed and stepped out, pulling on gloves she had patched too many times to count. Dylan and Emma were back at the small apartment they called home, likely doing homework under the dim light of a thrift store lamp. Lauren carried the weight of their future on her shoulders, a burden made heavier by the emptiness of her wallet and pantry. As she navigated the landfill, her sharp eyes scanned for anything of value: usable furniture, discarded toys, anything that could be cleaned up and resold or repurposed. She tried not to focus on the smell, a pungent reminder of how far her life had spiraled since her husband's sudden death. Grief had left her raw, but poverty left no room for self-pity. After an hour of searching, Lauren spotted something unusual amid the piles of refuse. A large, ornately patterned rug lay rolled up, its vibrant reds and blues standing out against the drab grays of surrounding trash. She approached cautiously, half expecting it to be ruined, but when she unrolled the edge, the craftsmanship was stunning. "This can't be real," she murmured to herself, brushing her fingers over the intricate designs. The fabric felt expensive, soft yet durable, unlike anything that belonged in a landfill. Straining to lift the heavy rug, Lauren maneuvered it into the back of her car. The effort left her breathless, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd found something significant. Back home, the kids greeted her with excitement, their faces lighting up at the sight of the vibrant rug. "Wow, Mom! It's like something from a palace," Emma exclaimed, her brown eyes wide with wonder. "Where'd you find it?" Dylan asked, his curiosity mingling with skepticism. "The landfill," Lauren admitted with a rueful smile. "But look at it. It's beautiful, isn't it?" The children nodded eagerly, and for a moment the heaviness in Lauren's chest eased. She laid the rug on the living room floor, the colors breathing life into the otherwise sparse room. As she cleaned it with a borrowed vacuum, Lauren noticed something odd: a bulge near one corner. Kneeling down, she carefully examined the fabric. "What's this?" she muttered, her fingers tracing the raised section. With a knife, she carefully sliced the stitching open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside were stacks of cash. Lauren's breath hitched as she pulled out the first bundle, then another and another. The crisp bills felt surreal in her hands. She stared at the money, disbelief giving way to a flood of emotions: relief, fear, hope, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. "Mom? Are you okay?" Emma's voice broke through her daze. Lauren quickly closed the compartment, shoving the cash out of sight. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just found something unexpected." She sent the kids to bed early that night, her mind racing as she stared at the rug and the fortune it concealed. This money could change everything. She could pay off her debts, move out of their cramped apartment, and give Dylan and Emma the life they deserved. But where had the money come from? Why was it hidden in a rug discarded at a landfill? The questions gnawed at her, but the allure of an escape from her struggles was almost impossible to resist. As the clock ticked into the early hours of the morning, Lauren sat at the kitchen table with a cup of lukewarm tea, the bundles of cash spread out before her. She knew that taking the money would solve her immediate problems, but it might also invite unforeseen consequences. Her late husband's voice seemed to echo in her mind, a memory from their many nights of long talks. "Always do what's right, Lauren, even when it's hard." Lauren placed the cash back into its hidden compartment and sealed it shut. She wasn't ready to decide, but one thing was certain: her life had just taken a turn she never could have anticipated. Lauren sat at the edge of her worn sofa, her hands trembling as she stared at the rug in the center of the room. The vibrant patterns, once a source of fascination, now seemed to mock her. Inside that rug lay enough money to transform her life, to free her family from the relentless grip of poverty. Yet the weight of her conscience pressed down on her like a mountain. Dylan and Emma were asleep in the next room, their gentle breathing a constant reminder of why she was even considering keeping the money. Her children didn't deserve to grow up with empty refrigerators, second-hand clothes, and a mother who scavenged at the landfill just to make ends meet. She pulled the rug open again, revealing the carefully restitched compartment. The bundles of cash lay inside, pristine and untouched, as though they had been waiting for her. With trembling fingers, Lauren picked up one of the stacks and fanned through the bills. Each one looked crisp and new, a perfect promise of escape. But where had it come from? Lauren's thoughts spiraled as questions bubbled to the surface. What kind of person hides so much money in a rug? Was it stolen? Drug money? Blood money? The idea chilled her. What if someone came looking for it? The thought of her children being in danger sent a shiver through her spine. Her late husband, Michael, would have known what to do. His face floated into her mind, calm and steady as it always had been. Lauren, he had said once during a particularly tough financial year, the world may take everything from you, but don't ever let it take your integrity. She could almost hear his voice now, as if he were sitting across from her at the kitchen table. Do what's right even if it's hard. Lauren buried her face in her hands. But Michael, it's so hard, she whispered to the empty room. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft creak. She turned to see Dylan standing in the doorway rubbing his eyes. Mom? Why are you up? Just thinking, honey, Lauren said, quickly folding the rug shut again. Dylan tilted his head, his 11-year-old face full of curiosity. About what? Lauren hesitated. About how to make things better for us, she said carefully. How to make sure you and Emma have everything you need. Dylan stepped closer, his small frame looking even more fragile in the dim light. We're okay, Mom. You work so hard for us. That's enough. His words struck her like a blow to the chest. Go back to bed, sweetheart, she said softly, her voice catching. I'll figure everything out. As Dylan shuffled back to his room, Lauren's resolve wavered. She had thought about the possibilities all day. She could finally pay off the mountain of bills piling on her kitchen counter. She could replace her sputtering car and fix the leaky faucet in the bathroom. She could move to a safer neighborhood where Dylan and Emma wouldn't have to hear sirens at night. But what if the money wasn't hers to take? What if it led to more trouble than it was worth? The next day, Lauren avoided the rug as if it were a coiled snake. She busied herself cleaning, organizing, and even tackling the long-neglected patch of garden outside their apartment. Still, the thought of the money consumed her. By the time evening rolled around, she was no closer to a decision. After dinner, Lauren sat with the children as they worked on homework. Emma, her youngest, struggled with multiplication, her brow furrowing in concentration. Mommy, why can't I just use a calculator? Emma asked, her lips pouting. Because calculators won't always be there to help you, sweetie, Lauren replied, trying to muster a smile. But even as she said it, she felt the sting of irony. If only she had a calculator to solve her current problem. That night, Lauren found herself back at the kitchen table, the rug splayed out before her. She reached for the phone, dialing the local police station but stopping just short of hitting the call button. Her stomach churned. Turning in the money felt like the right thing to do, but what if it got lost in bureaucratic red tape? Or worse, what if it drew unwanted attention to her family? She hung up the phone and stared out the window at the darkened street below. A pair of headlights passed slowly and her heart jumped. Were they looking for her? For the money? Lauren took a deep breath and closed the rug's compartment once more. She couldn't decide tonight, but she knew time was running out. Every second she kept the money, her family's safety, and her conscience, hung in the balance. As she climbed into bed, Lauren whispered into the darkness, Michael, I wish you were here. I don't know what to do. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Her dreams were filled with images of dollar bills swirling like leaves in the wind, the sound of sirens in the distance, and the faces of her children, both hopeful and frightened. When morning arrived, she felt no closer to peace. Lauren knew one thing for certain. The decision she made in the coming days would change everything, for better or worse. Victor Cross sat behind a massive mahogany desk in his penthouse office. The glittering skyline of downtown Chicago spread out before him. The dimly lit room smelled of cigars and leather, a throne room for a king who ruled the shadows. Victor was not a man to be trifled with, and the sharp lines of his face bore the marks of years spent clawing his way to the top of a criminal empire. But today his empire trembled. What do you mean it's gone? Victor's voice was calm, but it carried the lethal undertone of a storm about to break. Across the desk, his enforcer, Marcus Brick Barnes, shifted uncomfortably. Brick was a mountain of a man, but even he felt small under Victor's penetrating gaze. It's just as I said, boss. The money's missing. We tracked the van and it never made it to the drop. Victor leaned back, steepling his fingers as he processed the information. The missing money wasn't just a setback, it was a symbol of his control slipping. The cash, nearly $250,000, was supposed to grease the palms of key players in an expansion deal. Without it, alliances could crumble and rivals would smell blood. How does a van full of money just disappear? Victor asked, his voice deceptively soft. Brick hesitated before answering. There was an ambush. Our guys got taken out. By the time we found the van, it was stripped clean and dumped near a landfill. Victor's eyes narrowed. A landfill? Brick nodded. Yeah. We're running down leads, but so far nothing. Victor stood, walking to the window. His silhouette against the skyline exuded power, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed his frustration. He took a slow drag from his cigar before exhaling a plume of smoke. Brick, I don't pay you to bring me problems. I pay you to fix them. If the money was left at the landfill, someone found it. And if someone found it, I want their name. Brick nodded quickly. We're already on it. Benny's been asking around the area. Someone must have seen something. Victor turned, his eyes gleaming with cold determination. Good. Because if I don't have that money back in my hands soon, there won't be enough of you left to clean up the mess. Meanwhile, Benny Klein, one of Victor's lower-level operatives, was scouring the neighborhood around the landfill. The wiry man was known for his silver tongue and ability to sniff out information, but even he was having trouble piecing together the puzzle. Look man, all I'm saying is I didn't see nothing, said a wiry scavenger, his fingers nervously twisting a frayed cap. I just go there to grab cans, you know? Ain't looking for trouble. Benny sighed, pulling a wad of cash from his pocket and peeling off a 20. This isn't about trouble. It's about making sure you don't end up in it. Now, think real hard. Anyone poking around that landfill? Someone new? Someone out of place? The scavenger hesitated, eyeing the cash. There was this woman. Couple days ago. Real skinny, had kids with her. She pulled out this fancy-looking rug. Seemed weird, but I figured it was just one of those rich folks slum in it for antiques. Benny's ears perked up. A rug? Yeah, real nice. Persian or something. Looked out of place in all that junk. Did you see where she went? The man shrugged. Nah, but she had one of those beat-up old sedans. Blue, I think. Probably lives close by if she's driving, something like that. Benny slipped the man another 20 and walked away, pulling out his phone. Brick, we've got something. A woman with a blue sedan picked up a Persian rug at the landfill. Might be worth checking out. On the other end of the line, Brick grunted. I'll let the boss know. Start canvassing the neighborhood. We find her, we find the money. Victor sat in his office later that evening, listening as Brick laid out the latest development. A woman, Victor repeated, his tone dripping with disbelief. You're telling me some random woman stumbled onto a fortune and we're just now finding out? Brick nodded. She was at the landfill the same day the van was dumped. Benny's guys are narrowing down the area. We'll have her soon. Victor's hand tightened around the cigar in his fingers. Soon isn't good enough. I want her name. I want her address. And I want her scared enough to hand over every last dollar without question. Brick hesitated. What about the kids she had with her? Victor's glare could have cut steel. Do what you need to do, but make it clean. We can't afford loose ends. Brick nodded and left the room, his expression grim. He knew better than to argue with Victor, but a small part of him wondered just how far they would go to recover the money. Then again, second-guessing Victor Cross was a surefire way to end up in a shallow grave. The next day, Lauren stepped outside to hang laundry on the line behind her apartment complex. She barely noticed the black sedan parked down the street, its occupants watching her every move. Inside the car, Benny sat with a pair of binoculars, a sly grin spreading across his face. That's her, he said to the driver. Let's give her a little time to enjoy her newfound wealth. The boss will want to make this personal. As Lauren went about her day, blissfully unaware of the eyes tracking her every step, the walls of her safe little world began to close in. The money hidden in her rug had caught the attention of one of the most dangerous men in the city, and Victor Cross wasn't the type to let anything, or anyone, stand in his way. The morning was unseasonably bright as Lauren stepped out of her apartment and into the biting wind. The crisp air carried a mix of anxiety and resolve. Today she was going to chip away at the mountain of debt suffocating her family. With a portion of the cash folded neatly into her purse, Lauren headed to the utility office downtown. Morning, Mrs. Caldwell, greeted the clerk behind the counter, a middle-aged woman named Nancy who was notorious for her nosy tendencies. Her glasses perched on her nose, she eyed Lauren with interest. Paying on your account today? Lauren gave a tight smile, sliding several $100 bills across the counter. Yes, I'd like to settle the past due balance. Nancy's eyebrows shot up as she counted the cash. Well, this is a surprise, she said, her tone teetering between curiosity and disbelief. Haven't seen a payment this big in a while. Lauren's stomach twisted. I got some extra work recently, she lied smoothly. Thought I'd catch up while I could. Nancy hummed skeptically but didn't press further. Good for you. If only everyone was as responsible. As Lauren left the office, she felt the weight of Nancy's gaze boring into her back. By the time she reached her car, her nerves were frayed. She had barely used any of the money, but already she felt the judgment of the world pressing in on her. Later that afternoon, Lauren returned home to find Mrs. Henderson, her elderly neighbor, sweeping her porch. The woman paused, peering at Lauren with her hawk-like eyes. Lauren dear, she began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I saw you come back from town. Been out shopping? Just errands, Lauren replied curtly, not slowing her pace as she climbed the stairs to her apartment. Well, good for you, Mrs. Henderson called after her. It's nice to see you treating yourself once in a while. Lauren shut the door firmly behind her and exhaled. Mrs. Henderson meant no harm, but her constant prying grated on Lauren's nerves, especially now. It wasn't just Nancy or Mrs. Henderson, it was the whole neighborhood. A small town like Ridgewood thrived on gossip, and Lauren knew her every move would soon be the talk of the block. That night, as she prepared dinner, Lauren peered out the kitchen window. A black sedan sat idling down the street, its headlights off. It wasn't unusual for cars to pass through, but this one had been there for over an hour. She felt her pulse quicken. Was it the same car she'd seen yesterday near the grocery store? Lauren tried to shake off the unease, but a growing sense of paranoia had her checking the locks on the doors and windows twice before bed. The next day the same car appeared again, parked a little closer this time. Two men sat inside, their faces obscured. Lauren's heart pounded as she watched them from behind the curtains. Were they watching her? Or was she imagining things? By the third day, Lauren couldn't ignore the creeping dread any longer. She spent hours reorganizing the cash, moving it from its hidden compartment in the rug to new spots around the apartment. She stuffed small bundles into the false bottom of an old trunk, behind the lining of her coat closet, and even inside an unused coffee can in the pantry. Each new hiding spot brought a fleeting sense of relief, only to be replaced by another wave of anxiety. Mom, what are you doing? Dylan asked, finding her in the middle of stuffing a handful of bills into a book she rarely opened. Just organizing some things, Lauren said quickly, brushing off his question. Why don't you and Emma work on your puzzles? Dylan frowned but didn't push further. He grabbed Emma's hand and led her to the living room, glancing over his shoulder with a worried expression. Lauren sank into the couch once the kids were occupied. She rubbed her temples, trying to push away the nagging fear. If she was going to keep her family safe, she needed to stay vigilant. The black sedan wasn't the only thing troubling Lauren. At the grocery store, she caught a man in a leather jacket following her aisle by aisle. He didn't buy anything, just loitered, pretending to browse. At one point, their eyes met, and his lips curled into a faint smirk before he disappeared into the crowd. At home, the phone rang late into the night, but no one spoke when she answered. In the mornings, she found scuff marks in the dirt outside her back door. She began to feel like a trapped animal, constantly on edge, waiting for the next shoe to drop. Lauren's nerves reached their breaking point one evening when she returned from the laundromat. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, she noticed her front door was slightly ajar. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she pushed the door open, her hands trembling. Inside, the living room was untouched, but Lauren knew better than to believe it was a coincidence. She hurried to her first hiding spot, the trunk in the closet. The money was still there. Breathing a sigh of relief, she checked the other hiding places one by one. Everything was intact. Still, the intrusion confirmed what she feared most. Someone was watching her, and they were getting bolder. That night, as Lauren sat in the darkened apartment with a baseball bat clutched in her hands, she thought of Michael again. He wouldn't have hesitated to protect the family. He would have known how to handle this. But Michael wasn't here, and it was up to her to keep Dylan and Emma safe. Her thoughts wandered back to the police station. Could she trust the authorities? What if turning in the money only painted a target on her back? Her instincts screamed to run, but where could she go that Victor Cross and his men wouldn't follow? A sudden movement outside the window snapped her back to reality. She crept to the curtain and peeked out. The black sedan was gone, but the silence was almost worse. The unseen eyes that had been watching her might still be out there, lurking in the shadows. Lauren sat back down, clutching the bat tightly. The only thing more dangerous than being hunted was not knowing who was doing the hunting. The Ridgewood Police Department wasn't exactly a hub of bustling activity, but Officer Chris Turner liked it that way. A quiet day meant people were safe, and for a small-town cop, that was the goal. But the past week had been anything but quiet. Reports of suspicious cars, shadowy figures, and break-ins had started trickling in from Lauren Caldwell's neighborhood. Chris tapped a pen against his desk, scanning the reports with a furrowed brow. Ridgewood didn't see much crime beyond the occasional petty theft or bar fight, so this sudden spike in strange activity was out of the ordinary. Turner, his partner, Officer Elaine Marks, called as she leaned against the doorframe of his office. "Got another one." Call came in from an elderly woman on Maple. Said there's been a black car idling down the street every night. Chris straightened. "Same car as the other reports?" Elaine nodded. "Sounds like it. Might be worth checking out." Chris grabbed his jacket and badge. "Let's take a look." That evening, Chris cruised down Maple Street, his headlights cutting through the early twilight. The quiet suburb seemed normal at first glance, but his trained eye caught the subtle unease in the way people moved, hurried, glancing over their shoulders, locking doors behind them. He parked his patrol car and stepped out, scanning the area. An older woman, who he assumed was the caller, stood on her porch. She waved him over eagerly. "Officer Turner," she said, clutching her shawl tightly, "that car's been sitting there every night for hours. Always leaves when someone comes outside, but it's unnerving, I tell you." Chris nodded. "Thank you, ma'am. I'll keep an eye out." As he walked back to his car, he noticed a figure peeking out from behind a curtain across the street. He recognized Lauren Caldwell from her years working at the elementary school. Her face was pale, her posture tense. Something about her unease set off alarm bells in Chris's mind. The next morning, Chris decided to stop by Lauren's place. When she answered the door, she seemed reluctant, almost hesitant to let him in. "Morning, Miss Caldwell," Chris began, keeping his tone casual. "I've been investigating some suspicious activity in the area. Just wanted to see if you've noticed anything unusual." Lauren's grip on the door tightened. "Unusual?" "No, not really," she said quickly, avoiding his gaze. Chris tilted his head, studying her. "You're sure? A few neighbors have mentioned strange cars and unfamiliar faces around here." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I've seen the car. That's all." Chris nodded, not wanting to push too hard. "If you notice anything else or if you feel unsafe, you can always call the station. We're here to help." Lauren hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking toward the living room where her children were playing. "Thanks, Officer Turner. I'll keep that in mind." That afternoon, Chris couldn't shake the feeling that Lauren wasn't telling him everything. He drove past her street again, noticing the way she peeked out the window every few minutes. He decided to park a block away and watch. It didn't take long for a black sedan to roll down the street, slowing as it passed Lauren's apartment. Chris's pulse quickened. The car matched the descriptions from the reports, dark, nondescript, and with heavily tinted windows. He made a note of the license plate before following at a safe distance. The sedan eventually left the neighborhood and disappeared onto the highway, but Chris was certain now that something was amiss. He returned to the station and ran the plates, but they came back unregistered, a clear sign of deliberate anonymity. That evening, Lauren found herself pacing the living room, wringing her hands. She couldn't ignore the way Officer Turner had looked at her earlier, as if he could see through her carefully constructed facade. Her instincts told her to stay silent, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was running out of time. Finally, she made up her mind. She waited until Dylan and Emma were asleep before walking to the police station. When she entered, the bright fluorescent lights made her feel exposed, vulnerable. Chris was sitting at his desk, and his eyes widened in surprise when he saw her. "Miss Caldwell," he greeted, standing. "Everything all right?" Lauren glanced around nervously. "Do you have a moment to talk? Privately?" Chris gestured to a small meeting room. Once they were inside, he closed the door and offered her a seat. "What's going on?" Lauren hesitated, her fingers twisting in her lap. "I don't know if I'm overthinking things, but I've seen the car. The one you're investigating." Chris leaned forward, his expression intent. "When?" "For the past few days. It's been parked near my place and I think someone's been watching me." His brow furrowed. "Have you seen anyone approach your home? Any signs of a break-in?" Lauren hesitated again, debating how much to reveal. "There was a night when my door was ajar. Nothing was missing, but I feel like someone's been in my apartment." Chris's jaw tightened. "That's serious, Lauren. You should have called us immediately." "I didn't know what to do," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I'm scared." Chris softened, sensing the depth of her fear. "Listen, I'm going to help you. I'll patrol your street personally, and I'll make sure we get to the bottom of this." Lauren's eyes filled with tears, though she blinked them away quickly. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Chris nodded, his resolve firm. "We'll figure this out. You're not alone in this." As Lauren left the station, a small weight lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. But deep down, she knew the fight was far from over. Victor Cross and his men were still out there, and the secret she carried was a dangerous one. Meanwhile, Chris sat at his desk, reviewing the file again. Something about Lauren's fear felt larger than just a lurking car. He vowed to keep an eye on her, unaware of just how deep the danger surrounding her truly ran. Lauren's evening was quiet, too quiet. The children were asleep in their room and the apartment was still, save for the hum of the refrigerator. She tried to convince herself it was just another night, but the tension in her shoulders told a different story. For days she'd felt the noose tightening, her every step shadowed by a growing sense of dread. When the knock came, it wasn't tentative. It was sharp and deliberate, reverberating through the apartment. Lauren froze, her hand gripping the mug of tea she'd been holding. She placed it down carefully, her heart pounding in her chest. "Who is it?" she called out, her voice trembling. There was no answer. Another knock followed, louder this time, more insistent. Lauren crept toward the door and peered through the peephole. Two men stood on the other side, their faces cold and unreadable. She stepped back, her mind racing. These weren't neighbors. These weren't door-to-door salesmen. These were the men who had been watching her. The knock came again, followed by a low, menacing voice. "We know you're in there, Miss Caldwell. Open the door and we'll talk." Lauren's throat tightened. She glanced toward the children's room, her motherly instincts screaming at her to protect them. She tiptoed to her phone and dialed 911, but before she could hit call, the sound of the door being kicked in shattered the fragile silence. The wood splintered and the men entered, their heavy boots thudding against the floor. Lauren ducked into the kitchen, her heart racing as she searched frantically for something, anything, that could be used as a weapon. Her fingers wrapped around a cast-iron skillet just as the taller of the two men rounded the corner. "Miss Caldwell," he said smoothly, his lips curling into a thin smile. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." Lauren raised the skillet, her hands shaking. "Get out of my house." The man chuckled, holding up his hands as if to show he meant no harm. "We're just here for what belongs to us. Give us the money and we'll leave. No one has to get hurt." Lauren's grip tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." The second man, shorter but stockier, stepped into view. His expression was less amused. "Don't play dumb, lady. We know about the rug. We know about the money. Victor Cross doesn't like thieves." Lauren's stomach twisted at the mention of the name. She had heard rumors of Victor Cross, a man whose power stretched far beyond Ridgewood. If these men were here on his behalf, she and her children were in more danger than she'd realized. "I don't have your money," she lied, her voice firm despite the terror coursing through her veins. "It's gone." The taller man's smile faded. He took a step closer and Lauren swung the skillet instinctively, the heavy metal colliding with his arm. He cursed, stumbling back, and the second man lunged forward. Lauren ducked past him, her bare feet slipping on the tile as she bolted toward the children's room. "Dylan. Emma. Wake up," she shouted, throwing the door open. The children sat up, startled and wide-eyed. "Mom, what's going on?" Dylan asked, his voice trembling. "Come on," Lauren said urgently, grabbing their hands. "We have to go." The sound of footsteps echoed behind her as she ushered the kids toward the back door. She shoved it open and pushed them outside, the cold night air stinging their faces. "Run," she hissed, and the three of them sprinted toward the narrow alley behind the apartment complex. They didn't stop running until they reached the community shelter a few blocks away. The building was small but sturdy, a place that had served as a haven for families in crisis. Lauren banged on the door until an older man opened it, his face creased with concern. "Miss Caldwell?" he asked. "What's wrong?" "Please," Lauren gasped, pulling Dylan and Emma close. "We need somewhere safe to stay." The man nodded, ushering them inside. "You're safe here. No one can get to you." Lauren collapsed into a chair, holding her children tightly as tears streamed down her face. "It's going to be okay," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she believed it herself. Back at the Ridgewood Police Department, Chris Turner stared at the license plate information he'd dug up earlier. The unregistered car was enough to raise suspicions, but the name Victor Cross scrawled across a report on his desk sent a chill down his spine. Chris had heard of Victor, a crime lord whose operations stretched across state lines. If Cross was involved, this wasn't just a string of petty crimes, it was something much bigger. "Turner," Elaine said, poking her head into his office. "We got a call about a break-in near Maple. Witnesses said 2 men forced their way into an apartment. Looks like it was Lauren Caldwell's place." Chris bolted upright, his gut tightening. "Is she okay?" "She's not at the scene. Neighbors said they saw her running with her kids. She might have gone to the community shelter." Grabbing his jacket, Chris headed out the door, determination written all over his face. When Chris arrived at the shelter, he found Lauren sitting on a worn couch, her children huddled close. Her face lit up with a mixture of relief and exhaustion when she saw him. "Chris," she said, her voice shaky. "They came to my house. They broke in. They said they knew about the money." Chris's expression hardened. "Lauren, you need to tell me everything. Who are these people? Where did the money come from?" Lauren hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I found it in a rug at the landfill. I didn't know who it belonged to, but I was desperate. I thought maybe I could use it to—" "Victor Cross," Chris interrupted, his tone grim. "Those men were sent by him, weren't they?" Lauren nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I didn't know it was his." Chris knelt in front of her, his voice steady but urgent. "We need to get you and the kids out of here. If Cross knows you have the money, he won't stop until he gets it back." Lauren's hands trembled as she clutched Dylan and Emma tighter. "What do I do?" Chris placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone in this, Lauren. I'll protect you. But we have to move fast." As the night stretched on, Chris began making plans to keep Lauren and her children safe while digging deeper into Victor Cross's operation. The stakes had never been higher, and he knew the fight ahead would test every ounce of his courage and resolve. Lauren sat at the community shelter's kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone cold. The room buzzed with activity as neighbors and volunteers came and went, bringing supplies and offering words of comfort. Despite the chaos, Lauren felt a strange calm. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't alone. "Here," said Mrs. Henderson, placing a basket of fresh groceries on the counter. The elderly woman's tone was brisk, but her eyes were soft with concern. "You can't keep your strength up if you're not eating." "Thank you," Lauren murmured, her voice heavy with exhaustion. She never imagined the day when she would rely on Mrs. Henderson, the same nosy neighbor she had once tried to avoid, for help. Word of Lauren's plight had spread quickly through Ridgewood. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, and once the details emerged, people began stepping in. Some brought meals, others donated clothes for Dylan and Emma, and a few offered their homes as temporary refuges. "Lauren," said Pastor Bill, the shelter's director, as he approached her with a kind smile. "We're setting up a watch rotation. A few of the men in the community are going to keep an eye on the shelter around the clock. If anyone comes looking for trouble, they'll have to go through us first." Tears welled in Lauren's eyes as she nodded. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," Pastor Bill said firmly. "You're one of us and we take care of our own." Meanwhile, Chris Turner had buried himself in the police station's archives, determined to uncover the full scope of Victor Cross's operation. The pieces were starting to come together. A series of unsolved cases involving missing funds, coercion, and suspicious deaths that all pointed back to Victor and his network. One file in particular caught Chris's attention. It detailed a series of bribes made to local officials in Ridgewood and nearby towns. Payments had been funneled through shell companies, obscuring their true origins. Among the names on the list were 2 city council members, a zoning officer, and even a member of the police department. Chris slammed the file shut, his jaw tightening. Victor Cross wasn't just a threat to Lauren, he was a threat to the entire town. "Turner," Elaine Marks said, stepping into his office. "The mayor wants to know why you're digging into council records." Chris glanced up, his eyes flashing with determination. "Because they're complicit. Cross's network goes deeper than we thought, and it's time we cut it off at the roots." Elaine hesitated, then stepped closer. "What do you need?" Chris handed her the file. "Start pulling surveillance footage from the landfill and nearby businesses. We need to connect Cross's men to the money Lauren found. If we can tie it all together, we might be able to take him down." Back at the shelter, Lauren found herself surrounded by a steady stream of visitors. Dylan and Emma played with donated toys while Lauren spoke with volunteers about her next steps. Every so often, she glanced at the door, half expecting one of Victor's men to burst in. "Lauren," Mrs. Henderson said, sitting down across from her. "I've lived in this town for 40 years and I've never seen people rally like this before. You've got more support than you realize." Lauren managed a small smile. "It doesn't feel like enough sometimes. Victor Cross isn't just some thug. He has money, power, connections. What do I have? Mrs. Henderson reached across the table and patted Lauren's hand. You have this town. And trust me, that's worth more than all the money in the world. That evening, Chris arrived at the shelter, his face grim but resolute. He pulled Lauren aside, lowering his voice to keep the conversation private. We've got a breakthrough, he said. Victor's been bribing local officials to cover his tracks. If we can expose them, it'll destabilize his operation. Lauren frowned. How can I help? Chris hesitated. If you're willing, your testimony could be crucial. You've seen his men and you've got the money that ties back to him. But going public will put you and your kids in even greater danger. Lauren looked toward Dylan and Emma, who were laughing over a board game with a volunteer. The thought of putting them at risk made her stomach churn, but so did the idea of letting Victor's crimes go unpunished. I'll do it, she said, her voice steady. If it means keeping this town and my kids safe, I'll stand my ground. Chris nodded, a mix of pride and concern in his expression. All right. But we'll need to be careful. Once Victor realizes what we're doing, he'll come after you with everything he's got. Lauren squared her shoulders, determination hardening in her gaze. Let him come. I'm not running anymore. The next day, Lauren sat with Chris and Elaine in the police station, recounting every detail she could remember. Chris filed her statement and began coordinating with state investigators, ensuring the case against Victor was airtight. As word of Lauren's decision spread, the community's support only grew. Local businesses donated security cameras for the shelter, while neighbors organized fundraisers to help Lauren and her children get back on their feet. Even those who had been skeptical of her before now rallied behind her, inspired by her bravery. Lauren, Pastor Bill said during a town meeting, you've shown us all what it means to fight for what's right. No matter what happens next, you can count on us. Lauren's voice cracked as she responded. I wouldn't have made it this far without all of you. Thank you, for everything. But Lauren knew the fight was far from over. Victor Cross was still out there, and he wouldn't go down without a fight. As the community fortified itself for the battle ahead, Lauren braced herself for the storm that was sure to come. The hum of fluorescent lights in the police station was a constant reminder of the gravity of Lauren's decision. She sat across from Chris Turner, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as he laid out their next steps. You're sure about this? Chris asked, his tone serious but gentle. Once we move forward, there's no going back. Victor won't just let this slide. Lauren straightened her back, meeting his eyes with determination. I'm sure. I can't keep running, Chris. My kids deserve better than living in fear. Chris nodded, pulling a map of Ridgewood from his desk drawer. All right. Here's the plan. We'll turn the money over to the state investigators as evidence, but we'll do it in a way that keeps you and the kids out of the spotlight. We'll set up decoys to throw Victor's men off, and I'll have officers stationed near the shelter and your apartment. Lauren listened intently, her mind racing. It was a good plan, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Victor was already 2 steps ahead. What if he finds out before we can make the handoff? Chris's jaw tightened. We'll be ready. I promise. That evening, Lauren returned to the shelter, clutching a small box containing the cash she had carefully retrieved from her hiding spots. Pastor Bill met her at the door, his kind face etched with worry. How are you holding up? He asked. Lauren managed a faint smile. I'm okay. The kids are restless, but they're safe. That's all that matters. Pastor Bill placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You're doing the right thing. The town's behind you no matter what happens. Across town, in a dimly lit warehouse on the outskirts of Ridgewood, Victor Cross leaned against a steel desk, his expression cold and calculating. Brick stood nearby, shifting uncomfortably under Victor's sharp gaze. They've got the money, Brick said finally. The woman and that cop Turner are planning something. They're bringing in state investigators. Victor's lips curled into a thin smile. Of course they are. People like them always think the law will save them. What do you want us to do? Brick asked, his voice low. Victor tapped his fingers against the desk, his mind racing through possibilities. Send a message. Make it clear that if they come after me, there will be consequences, not just for her but for everyone who gets in my way. The next morning, Lauren woke to chaos. She and the other shelter residents were jolted from their beds by the sound of shattering glass. Someone had thrown a brick through the front window, tied with a note that read, "Stay quiet or everyone pays." Dylan and Emma clung to her as she tried to calm them down, her heart pounding with fear. Pastor Bill called the police, but Lauren knew this was only the beginning. Victor was making good on his threats, and she couldn't let it escalate further. Chris arrived minutes later, his face a mask of controlled anger as he surveyed the damage. "This is an escalation," he said to Lauren, lowering his voice to keep the children from overhearing. "Victor's trying to scare you into backing down." "Well, it's not going to work," Lauren said firmly. Her fear had been replaced by a fiery resolve. "We need to do this, Chris. The sooner, the better." Chris nodded. "I've already contacted the state team. We'll make the handoff tonight. But we need to be extra careful. Victor's men are watching." As night fell, Ridgewood seemed unnaturally quiet. The police station bustled with activity as Chris finalized preparations for the operation. Officers dressed in plain clothes were stationed at key locations around the shelter and the meeting point. Chris had personally selected a secure drop site on the outskirts of town, a quiet field bordered by trees, to minimize the risk of a confrontation. Lauren sat in the back of Chris's patrol car with Dylan and Emma, trying to keep them calm. "It's like an adventure," she said, forcing a smile. "We're going to help the police catch the bad guys." Dylan frowned, his young face serious. "But what if the bad guys come after us?" Lauren hesitated, glancing at Chris in the front seat. He turned around, his voice steady and reassuring. "They won't get near you. I promise." The drive to the drop site was tense, every shadow and passing car a potential threat. When they arrived, the field was illuminated by a single spotlight mounted on a squad car. A black SUV waited in the distance, its tinted windows hiding the state investigators who had come to collect the money. Chris stepped out first, scanning the area before motioning for Lauren to follow. She clutched the box tightly, her pulse pounding in her ears as she walked toward the SUV. The state agents stepped out, their expressions professional but wary. "Miss Caldwell?" one of them asked. Lauren nodded, handing over the box. "This is everything." The agent opened it, inspecting the neatly bundled cash before giving a nod of approval. "We'll secure this as evidence." "Thank you." As Lauren turned to head back to the patrol car, the stillness of the night was shattered by the roar of engines. Two black sedans barreled into the field, their headlights cutting through the darkness like daggers. Chris immediately drew his weapon, positioning himself between Lauren and the approaching vehicles. "Get in the car," he shouted. The sedan screeched to a halt and Victor's men spilled out, armed and ready. "Hand over the money," one of them barked, his gun trained on the agents. "Not happening," Chris said, his voice steady despite the chaos. The standoff seemed to stretch for an eternity, the tension thick enough to cut. Then in the distance the sound of more sirens grew louder. Victor's men hesitated, realizing reinforcements were on the way. "Let's go," one of them shouted, retreating to the car. The sedan sped off into the night, leaving the field in a cloud of dust. Chris exhaled, lowering his weapon as the additional police units arrived. He turned to Lauren, who was holding Dylan and Emma tightly. "It's over," he said. "You did it." As they drove back to Ridgewood, Lauren felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. The money was in safe hands and Victor's reach had been weakened. But she knew the fight wasn't over yet. Victor Cross wouldn't go down without a final battle, and she was ready for it. The first rays of dawn painted the sky in soft oranges and pinks, but Chris Turner's focus was elsewhere. He stood in the Ridgewood Police Department briefing room, surrounded by officers preparing for the operation of a lifetime. The warrant to raid Victor Cross's hideout had come through, thanks to Lauren's testimony and the evidence tied to the confiscated cash. "All right, listen up," Chris began, his voice steady and commanding. "We've got one shot at this. Cross is dangerous and his men won't hesitate to fight back. Our goal is to secure the property, apprehend all suspects and recover any additional evidence of his operations." The room was tense, but the officers nodded in unison. They knew the stakes were high, not just for Lauren and her family but for Ridgewood as a whole. Chris's partner, Elaine Marks, approached him as the team geared up. "Think she'll be okay?" she asked, referring to Lauren. "She'll be safe at the shelter," Chris replied, though worry lingered in his eyes. "Pastor Bill has half the town watching her and the kids. Victor's not getting near them." Elaine nodded. "Let's end this." Meanwhile, at the community shelter, Lauren paced the small recreation room. Dylan and Emma were playing with other children nearby, their laughter a brief reprieve from the anxiety weighing on her. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of fear and resolve, and now it all hinged on Chris and the police force. Pastor Bill entered the room, his face calm but serious. "Lauren, I just got word from the police station. They're moving in on Victor's hideout." Lauren stopped pacing, her hands trembling slightly. "Do you think they'll catch him?" "If anyone can, it's Chris," Pastor Bill said confidently. "And don't forget, you helped make this possible. Your courage inspired this whole town to stand up. Lauren glanced at the window where a group of neighbors had gathered outside, forming a watchful barrier around the shelter. Their presence reminded her she wasn't alone anymore. Ridgewood had rallied behind her, and that strength gave her hope. The raid began just after sunrise. Victor's hideout, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, was surrounded by officers. Chris led the team, his eyes scanning every shadow as they approached the entrance. "Team Alpha on my mark," he said into his radio, signaling the officers positioned at the back entrance. "Team Bravo, stand by." With a swift motion, the front door was breached and officers poured inside. The warehouse was a maze of metal shelves and dimly lit corridors, but Chris's team moved with precision. They found Victor's men scattered throughout, scrambling to destroy evidence and mount a defense. "Hands in the air." Chris shouted, his weapon trained on two enforcers who froze mid-step. They complied, dropping their weapons and kneeling as officers secured them. Deeper inside the warehouse, Victor stood in a makeshift office, calmly watching the chaos unfold through a security monitor. Brick was beside him, his massive frame tense. "Boss, we need to go," he urged. Victor smirked, unbothered. "Let them come. This isn't over." Seconds later, the door burst open and Chris stepped in, his weapon raised. "Victor Cross, you're under arrest." Victor raised his hands slowly, his smile never faltering. "Officer Turner. I've heard so much about you. Shame you're wasting your talent on a town like Ridgewood." "Save it," Chris snapped, motioning for an officer to cuff him. "You're done." As Victor was led out of the warehouse, Brick lunged at Chris, trying to make a last-ditch effort to escape. Chris dodged, delivering a swift strike that sent the enforcer sprawling to the ground. Officers moved in, securing Brick and the remaining associates. Back at the police station, the mood was one of cautious celebration. Victor's arrest had sent shockwaves through Ridgewood, and the evidence recovered from the warehouse painted a damning picture of his criminal empire. Bribes, money laundering, extortion. It was all there, neatly tying him to years of corruption. Lauren arrived at the station later that day, escorted by Pastor Bill. Chris greeted her with a tired but triumphant smile. "It's over," he said. "We got him." Lauren exhaled, a wave of relief washing over her. "Thank you, Chris. For everything." "It wasn't just me," Chris replied. "You and this community made it happen." The ripple effects of Victor's arrest were felt immediately. Local officials tied to his operations were exposed, prompting resignations and investigations. The town of Ridgewood began to heal, its residents no longer living under the shadow of fear. At a community gathering later that week, Lauren stood before a crowd of neighbors and friends. The shelter's recreation room was packed, the air buzzing with energy and hope. "I didn't think I could do this," Lauren admitted, her voice shaking slightly. "There were so many moments when I wanted to give up, to run away. But every one of you reminded me that I wasn't alone. You showed me that this town is worth fighting for. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart." The room erupted into applause, and Lauren spotted Dylan and Emma beaming from the front row. They had been through so much, but for the first time in weeks she saw light in their eyes. Chris approached her after the gathering, a proud smile on his face. "You did good, Lauren." "We did good," she corrected, her voice steady. "This town is stronger than Victor Cross ever thought it could be." As Ridgewood moved forward, Lauren felt a newfound strength within herself. The ordeal had tested her in every way imaginable, but it had also revealed the resilience of her community and her own unshakable resolve. She had faced the storm and emerged stronger, not just for her children but for the town she called home. Victor Cross was gone, his empire dismantled. And Lauren Caldwell was no longer the woman who scavenged for survival. She was a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of courage and unity. The chill of early winter filled the air in Ridgewood as Lauren walked through the bustling town square, her steps purposeful and light. It had been weeks since Victor Cross was arrested, and the town was beginning to find its rhythm again. For Lauren, life was far from perfect, but it was finally stable, something she hadn't experienced in years. She paused in front of the newly opened Ridgewood Community Fund office. A small brass plaque on the door gleamed in the sunlight, its engraved words a testament to what the town had accomplished. Ridgewood Community Fund, established to uplift and protect. Lauren pushed open the door, greeted by the warm scent of coffee and the hum of conversation. Inside, volunteers bustled about, organizing donations, scheduling outreach programs, and assisting families in need. "Morning, Lauren," called Mrs. Henderson from a desk stacked with paperwork. "Got a full list of applicants for the Housing Assistance Program. Seems word spreading. Lauren smiled. That's the idea. Let's make sure everyone who needs help gets it. The fund had been Lauren's way of giving back. After the legal proceedings concluded, a portion of the unclaimed cash had been turned over to the town. With Pastor Bill and the community's support, they decided to use it to create a foundation that would help struggling families like hers. The fund provided everything from rent assistance to job placement services, a lifeline for those who felt like they were drowning. Lauren's own life had also taken a turn for the better. Through connections made during the fund's creation, she'd landed a job as a program coordinator at a local nonprofit. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well and it gave her the chance to help others, a purpose she found deeply fulfilling. Her apartment, once a crumbling reminder of her struggles, had been repaired and painted with the help of volunteers. Dylan and Emma now had a safe, warm home to grow up in, and Lauren took comfort in the sound of their laughter filling the space. "Mom, look." Dylan called one evening holding up his math test. "I got an A." Lauren hugged him tightly, her pride swelling. "That's amazing, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." Emma, not to be outdone, held up a picture she had drawn. "I made this at school today. It's us with our new house." Lauren's eyes misted as she admired the colorful drawing. "It's beautiful, Emma. You're so talented." The town itself had transformed in the aftermath of Victor's downfall. The corrupt officials who had enabled his syndicate were replaced by honest, community-driven leaders. Businesses that had once struggled under the weight of extortion began to thrive, and neighbors who had been wary of each other now worked together to rebuild. One evening, the town gathered in the square for a celebration of their newfound hope. Strings of lights hung from trees, and tables were piled high with food donated by local restaurants. A stage had been set up for speeches, music, and dancing. Pastor Bill stood at the microphone, his voice carrying over the crowd. "Tonight, we celebrate not just the end of a dark chapter but the beginning of something brighter. Ridgewood is stronger because of people like Lauren Caldwell, who reminded us what courage and integrity look like." The crowd erupted into applause as Lauren was called to the stage. She hesitated, overwhelmed by the warmth of their support, but Pastor Bill gently nudged her forward. As she took the microphone, Lauren's voice trembled at first but grew steady. "I don't know how to thank all of you," she began. "When I found myself in the middle of something far bigger than I could handle, this town stepped up. You stood by me when I was afraid, and you showed me the power of a community that refuses to back down." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces, neighbors, friends, and even strangers who had become part of her journey. "This isn't just my victory. It's ours. Together, we've proven that even in the face of fear, integrity and kindness can prevail." The applause was deafening, and as Lauren stepped down from the stage, she was enveloped in hugs and handshakes. Dylan and Emma ran up to her, their faces glowing with pride. "You were amazing, Mom," Dylan exclaimed. Emma tugged on her sleeve. "You're like a superhero." Lauren laughed, pulling them both into a hug. "Not a superhero," she said softly. "Just a mom doing her best." As the night wound down, Lauren stood at the edge of the square, watching the town she loved come alive. Chris joined her, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets. "Quite the speech," he said with a grin. "Thanks," Lauren replied, her smile warm. "Couldn't have done any of this without you." Chris shrugged. "You had it in you all along. You just needed a little push." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of the past weeks finally lifting. Lauren turned to him, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Chris. For everything." He nodded, his expression serious. "You showed more bravery than most people ever could. Ridgewood's lucky to have you." As Lauren walked home that night, Dylan and Emma skipping ahead of her, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but she knew she had the strength to face whatever came next. Lauren Caldwell, once a struggling widow scavenging for survival, had found her place, not just as a mother but as a leader, a fighter, and a beacon of hope. And as Ridgewood flourished around her, she knew that this was only the beginning of something extraordinary.